Now, the Larry O'Connor Show. And AM 630.
David Bossie and Corey Lewandowski have a brand new book out about the deep state and their attempts to take down President Trump. David Bossie will join us to talk about that at the 4 o'clock hour. There's going to be a bit of a theme in the program today, as in 5 o'clock we're going to be joined by Chuck Ross, the Daily Caller, to give us his latest reporting on the guilty plea from Michael Cohen in federal court. In fact, let's start right there with Tom Fitton. He is the president of Judicial Watch, and of course he's been watching this Mueller investigation like a hawk. Tom, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
What exactly, depending on the news outlet, you're getting a lot of different stories about what Michael Cohen confessed to today, what he pled to, and how it relates to the president and so-called Russian collusion. This is another one of those process crimes, right? This is a person who lied under oath.
Yeah, it's not to diminish that you shouldn't lie under oath, but he's not being prosecuted for any misconduct he committed on behalf of the Trump organization, the Trump campaign, or is he being prosecuted for colluding with the Russians to steal the election, which is the crank conspiracy theory we have a special counsel investigating wasting taxpayer dollars with. He's being prosecuted because he evidently lied. Whether he lied or not seems to be a little bit of an open question, even looking at the documents to Congress about the scope and the involvement and the status of a potential real estate deal and who he was talking to about the real estate deal involving the Trump organization and Russia.
And let's sort of dwell there for a moment, because we're told that he lied to Congress and he lied to investigators with regard to whether there were business dealings with the Trump organization and Russian interests during the presidential campaign. Is it cut and dry as to whether what he said about that was a lie or whether there was just some sort of timeline issue here? Again, not to diminish it, but we've also seen other people who have pled to lying to the Mueller investigators who then afterwards say, yeah, well, I was just trying to get out of a big headache here, and so that's what I did. What's at play here specifically?
Well, he supposedly lied about the number of times he talked about the issue internally. I guess he said a few times, I guess a little more than a few times. He lied about whether he was thinking about going to Russia. He said he wasn't, and in fact he didn't, but evidently he talked a little bit more about it in terms of planning than he admitted to.
Okay.
Kind of to describe it kind of tells you how much of, as I called it, a weak tea it is in terms of all of the resources of the federal government being used to prosecute this.
Well, how does this play into the larger Russian collusion narrative? Because many people, listen, there are a lot of different narratives out there, as you know, Tom Fitton. One of them is that Trump really didn't even want to be president, so he had all these big business dealings going on with the Russian government, and that's why he was, going easy on them and not interested in being a forceful commander-in-chief against them because he had financial interests. Is it connected to that?
If that's the latest version of the Russia conspiracy theory, sure.
Well, it's one of them. It's one of them.
You can never defend yourself against a theory that changes to fit all circumstances, including circumstances that undermine the core issue for which the special counsel was appointed to see whether President Trump or the Trump organization, the Trump campaign, coordinated with the Russians to try to steal the elections or colluded with the Russians in an appropriate way on election issues. And there's no evidence that took place. And so, so you take you change the argument, something that he's not being investigated for or ought not to be investigated for, and stake your ground there. Either way, it shows the weakness of the underlying reason the counsel was appointed.
Is there any part of this guilty plea that involves the Russians saying, listen, while we're talking about this, tower that we want to build in Moscow, a Trump tower in Moscow, if Vladimir can do anything to help Trump become president, let us know. Let's work with you. We'll help you become president. Is that, as strange as that sounds, that's part of the conspiracy theory as well.
I read the document. I didn't see it alleged any misconduct by President Trump or any type of activity as you suggest. And I suggest to your listeners, go online. These days you can easily figure out how to find access to the original court document. Read it yourselves and see if you agree with my analysis. This is the wonders of the internet. This is why the government doesn't want. That's why the government on the left wants to control it, because they don't want you to see some of these underlying documents, and they would have had the liberal media mediate them for you and describe them for you. Look at them yourself, and you'll see there's not much to this indictment or this plea deal that warrants the hysterical coverage you're hearing today.
Our guest is Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. And listen, if there's one thing that the Mueller investigation has been able to succeed at, it's get people to plead guilty to giving misinformation, giving incomplete answers, or outright lying to investigators. We saw that today as well. There's some discussion that the timing of this correlates to the president's submission of written answers to questions at the end of last week, that in some way Mueller was waiting for Trump to go on the record with his answers about these Trump Tower meetings or dealings with Russia so then he could drop this bomb about Michael Cohen and what he has said about it. Is there anything there that based on your investigation?
Well, I would assume good faith on the part of the partisans who are part of this Mueller special counsel operation. Remember, it was conceived as a result of anti-Trump activism by Peter Strzok and James Comey and others in the FBI who hated President Trump and the Justice Department. So, I think that's a reasonable argument. I think what's as troubling is that it gets dropped on the day in a way to smear President Trump and make him look bad at a very sensitive time geopolitically as we're dealing with outrageous Russian actions with respect to the Ukraine. And it shows you why this Justice Department is just out to get Donald Trump, and they'll trample over our national security concerns and hamstring and embarrass the president as he's trying to defend our national security interests abroad, not only with respect to Russia, but every other country.
Well, and what about that aspect? Because we did see the president announce, or the administration announced, that they were not going to be meeting with Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit this weekend in Argentina. Is there some suggestion that this is a direct result? And I agree with you, that's not necessarily a good thing, because setting aside the Mueller investigation, there are some major issues geopolitically that America should be discussing with Russia. Would we be putting those discussions on a back burner because of the appearance that in some way this is conflicting with the Mueller investigation? That's not good.
Oh, everything the president does with respect to Russia has this Mueller investigation behind it in terms of casting a cloud over his decision-making, and I'm sure it's got to be infecting how he approaches this issue, and he must have to worry about this every time he communicates with or about the Russia issue.
Yeah.
And, no one hired the Justice Department or the special counsel to set our foreign policy agenda, but evidently it is, because Lord knows the president isn't allowed to tell the Justice Department what to do according to the corrupt, unconstitutional analysis that the establishment and the left would give us.
It opens up a larger question. I saw a lot of people who were critics of the Mueller investigation make this point, that other than these indictments of this Russian troll farm, the Russian social media farm that most people say will never really find its way into court because these Russians are not going to come to America to defend themselves. Other than that, most of what Mueller has been able to bring about are, and also, by the way, setting aside the Manafort thing, are these guilty pleas with regard to lying to investigators. In other words, without the Mueller investigation itself, those crimes wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? which is a little Orwellian to think about, that the crime was committed, or these crimes that Mueller has been able to find were committed because Mueller was empowered to look for a crime. Do you know what I mean?
Right, and look, you should tell the truth to the FBI. The law requires it. You tell the truth to grand juries. You tell the truth to U.S. attorneys or people who are purporting to act with the power of a U.S. attorney, like Mueller, in my view, improperly is. But you got to presume that they're representing law and order. You tell them the truth. But these prosecutions are being used to justify the Mueller investigation. And, as I call it, it's a self-licking ice cream cone.
Yeah.
They're many of the key indictments are about lying to investigators, which obstructs justice and is not to be countenanced. But it's not about the fundamental issue of Russia collusion. And in fact, there's no evidence to date that any American on the Trump campaign or anywhere else colluded with the Russians to influence our elections like this. The only evidence out there is the Clinton campaign through Fusion GPS used Russian intelligence sources to bring in defamatory dirt through this dossier to allow the Justice Department and the FBI to have a pretext to spy on the Trump team. That's the Russia collusion as best I can tell, but there's no Russia collusion with the Trump people.
Our guest is Tom Fitton. He's the president of Judicial Watch, judicialwatch.org, and there's some other things going on here in this town, Tom, that I know that you're on top of. The first is what appears to be a full frontal assault against Matt Whitaker, the president's choice for interim attorney general, potentially attorney general for keeps. What are you guys doing to try to push back against this idea that Congress in some way can block a president's appointment to attorney general because there this alleged conflict because he had opinions about cases?
Well, the president has the power to make this appointment not only constitutionally but as a result of a law passed by Congress. And, we should understand that the attacks on Whitaker aren't about the constitutionality of his appointment, which I won't bore you with because I don't think they're made in good faith, but because they're afraid that Whitaker is going to constrain the Mueller investigation. Though, frankly, I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah.
And now we've got...
but is this all... I agree with you, and I think that most constitutional experts would agree with you. So is that really what this is about? This is really just sort of a shot across the bow to warn Whitaker. So if he does try to infringe or inhibit or even oversee the Mueller investigation, he's already in political hot water.
Yes, exactly. And Mr. Whitaker has an obligation to oversee the Mueller investigation. And I think he has. I think he's obligated to take steps to rein it in. I mean, look at the craziness with the Roger Stone Corsi email issue and who knew what and when. I mean, if you can follow that, more power to you. But the fact that you got federal prosecutors urgently prosecuting these issues is just unbelievable. And I tell you, the Justice Department is a complete mess as a result of this Mueller investigation. Quickly, 2 weeks ago, we were in court, Larry, arguing the court to compel Hillary Clinton to answer basic email questions. And it's one thing to have her lawyer personally come up and say, no, that shouldn't be the case. But you had the Justice Department doing that. At the same time, the Justice Department is harassing President Trump with 24 questions on this crank Russia collusion scandal. This Justice Department is certainly not on the side of constitutional government, but certainly it's all about getting Trump and protecting Hillary. Still,
yeah. And by the way, to that end, this final thing, Jeff Flake, we see blocking judicial confirmations in the Senate because he wants to move legislation that would prohibit the president from firing Robert Mueller. What part of the Constitution allows the legislative branch to tell the executive branch who they can hire or not? And by the way, if this were to go through, if Jeff Flake's dream were to happen and this law were passed, then who does Mueller answer to at that point? This is a terrifying prospect.
No, he gets that. Well, I think that's the current question still. Who does he answer to? Because the left would tell you that Whitaker isn't allowed to oversee him. The regulations of the Justice Department say that he can't be supervised on a day-to-day basis by anyone, including the person who appointed him.
And meanwhile, he has a grand jury and the power of subpoena, and he can bring people to court and get them convicted and thrown in jail. How could they be in favor of the idea of having a prosecutor with all this power and control and no accountability?
This isn't a principled argument. This is an issue about getting Trump, and they're willing to throw out the rule of law in order to destroy President Trump.
Yeah.
They're willing to spy on him and now try to prosecute his friends and family in a illicit, inappropriate way in order to get at him. And it's a shame to see the rule of law take a backseat to power politics, but certainly we're going to be yelling about it. And I just wish more people other than President Trump in Congress were yelling about it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad Judicial Watch is. Again, it's judicialwatch.org if you want to keep Tom Fitton going and keep his actions alive there. Make sure you make your Christmas donation. Tom, always good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. I know it's going to be a busy day for you today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Lou.
That's Tom Fitton. It's Judicial Watch. And again, that's his perspective on Michael Cohen's guilty plea. But, if you change the channel and listen to or watch, and I don't suggest you do this, of course, but if you watch what's going on in cable news, that people are absolutely convinced that this is one step closer to the impeachment of the President of the United States. Tom Fitton doesn't see it that way. I certainly don't see it that way.